Welcome to True Echo, where the stories that shape us echo louder than the voices that tried to silence us. Today's journey is not just about martial arts, it's about prejudice, legacy, and the quiet strength of a girl who was underestimated from the moment she walked into the room. But what no one at the dojo knew, was that she carried a secret that would shatter every single assumption. Stay with us, because this isn't just a story, it's a revolution wrapped in a white belt. The sun dipped low over suburban Atlanta, casting a warm amber hue across the modest strip mall where the Golden Dragon Karate Academy was tucked between a laundromat and a shuttered bookstore. Beneath the red and gold sign that stretched over its glass doors, a girl stood still. Her name was Amara Gardner. She clutched the strap of her old, battered gym bag, a faded thing with peeling patches, and took one final breath before stepping inside. The instant she entered, the temperature seemed to shift. Eyes turned. Conversations paused. Laughter flickered like a match. It wasn't just the way she walked in, hesitant and small, it was who she was, young, black, and alone. Tyler Evans, the self-proclaimed king of the dojo, noticed her first. Tall, broad-shouldered, and used to being the center of attention, Tyler cocked his head and snorted. Didn't know this place had a preschool division, he muttered loud enough for his sidekick Josh Wilson to hear. Josh, wiry and loud with wild blonde curls, caught on immediately and mimicked the clumsy way Amara tried to tie the oversized white belt around her waist. Erica Matthews, the dojo's manager, stood at the front desk flipping through paperwork, her sharp features stiffening as she noticed Amara's hesitation. Another walk-in, she whispered to Sensei Rick Walker, a graying man with arms crossed over a neatly pressed black GI. You sure we're insured for special cases? Rick didn't respond. He simply watched Amara. Not kindly. Not harshly. Just, with caution. Amara bowed low, her braids tucked neatly under the collar of her uniform. Her voice was barely a whisper. I'd like to join the beginner's class, if that's all right. Amanda, the receptionist, hesitated before handing over the form. Fill this out and bring it back. From the benches, more chuckles bubbled up. Hope someone shows her how to tie that belt before she trips over it, one kid whispered. Amara heard it. She heard all of it. But she didn't flinch. She filled in the form line by line with silent precision, then returned it with both hands, bowing slightly once more. Her fingers trembled only a little. What none of them saw, what no one thought to look for, was the focus buried in her eyes. A steel-cold stillness. She watched everything. The way Tyler executed a roundhouse kick but dropped his heel a second too late. How Josh's balance leaned forward every time he threw a punch. Amara watched and filed it all away, not like a newcomer learning, but like a seasoned fighter studying her opponents. When class began, Sensei Rick called for warm-ups. Students moved in rhythm, sharp blocks, crisp kicks, powerful kiais echoing through the hardwood hall. Amara moved too, clumsy and slow, arms out of sync, breath unsteady. She looked every bit the amateur they expected her to be. Tyler smirked. Josh exaggerated a fake fall. Whoops. Looks like someone forgot their balance at home. More laughter. Even the older students joined in, their mockery subtle but sharp. Rick passed by Amara, stopping only to straighten her posture with a curt nudge. If you need to sit out, just say so. You don't have to prove anything. The word stung more than she expected. But she merely bowed her head in acknowledgement and returned to the line. With every misstep, Josh and Tyler's whispers grew louder. It was open season now, and Amara was the prey. Halfway through drills, Tyler shoved her out of formation with a deliberate, accidental, bump. Amara nearly fell but caught herself. No one helped her back. Josh laughed louder than ever. Let her sit this one out, Sensei, Tyler said. She doesn't even know left from right. Rick hesitated, watching Amara again. Then nodded. Step out, Gardner. Observe for now. Amara bowed respectfully, hands folded in front of her, and walked to the edge of the mat without protest. But before sitting, she turned and bowed once more to Rick. A deep bow. The kind taught not just in dojos, but in homes where tradition mattered. That night, she returned to her tiny apartment, a space barely big enough to stretch in. Her bed was low to the ground. The only real furniture was a small desk, a wooden box tucked beneath it. She opened the box with reverent care. Inside was a frayed black belt, coiled like a sleeping snake, its fabric smoothed with age and sweat. Alongside it were photographs, one of a younger Amara standing on a podium in Japan, flanked by stern-looking masters. Another of her father, James Gardner, a former U.S. Marine who'd raised her on discipline, tea ceremonies, and hours of kata beneath cherry blossom trees in Okinawa. Beneath the pictures was a note in her father's handwriting. Strength is born from adversity. Never let the world define you. Amara stared at the belt. Then slowly wrapped it around her knuckles like a boxer wrapping tape. She breathed in deeply. Tomorrow, she whispered, will be different. And so it began, not a fight against other students, but against every sneer, every whispered doubt, and every scar life had already left on her. Tomorrow would be the first spark of everything that came next. The next day, the dojo felt no different on the surface, same sharp scent of sweat and wood polish, same crisp snap of GIs being adjusted, and the same jeering whispers the moment Amara stepped in. But something had shifted within her. Her hands no longer trembled as she tied the too long belt. Her shoulders relaxed. Her breath came slower, deeper. Tyler leaned against the wall with his arms crossed, smirking. She came back. Guess she didn't learn her lesson the first time. Josh added with a chuckle, maybe she's trying to win, most improved clown. The sneers didn't land the same way this time. Amara's eyes flicked toward them only once, calm, unreadable, and then back to her own shadow on the mat. She took her place in the lineup quietly, making herself small again. But inside, she wasn't shrinking. Today's focus was kicking form, simple front kicks, but deceptively difficult to execute with balance and control. Rick demonstrated the motion, strong and fluid, before calling for the students to pair up and practice. Mia Lee, a petite Asian-American girl who had joined the class just a few days before Amara, hesitated as everyone else scrambled to find a partner. She stood uncertain, glancing around. Most ignored her. Some turned away pointedly. I'll work with you, Amara said softly. Mia blinked in surprise. Really? Amara nodded. Let's just focus on balance, okay? As they began the drill, Mia struggled to hold her stance, wobbling with each attempt. Tyler, passing by with Josh, scoffed loudly. Look at this. The newbie teaching another newbie. What's next? A toddler class? Josh raised his voice in a mock announcer's tone. Introducing knockdown kicks, hosted by Amara and Mia. Guaranteed to fall flat. The laughter was cruel, and it rang through the dojo like a slap. But Amara didn't flinch. She leaned closer to Mia and whispered, ignore them. They only know loud. We know quiet. She gently guided Mia's foot placement, then helped adjust her shoulders. Take a breath. Focus on your center. The power comes from here. She tapped gently over Mia's abdomen. Not just your leg. Mia's next kick was far more solid. Her eyes widened in surprise. How do you know this stuff? She asked. I've been taught by people who saw strength in the quietest moments, Amara replied with a small smile. Their practice continued. The mockery still came, but this time, it didn't dominate the room. Tyler's taunts grew weaker the more Mia's balance improved. Josh's fake laughs trailed into uncertain silence as he realized Amara was no longer the same girl who had stumbled on day one. From across the dojo, Rick observed carefully. Something had changed. The girl he had once dismissed as a liability was now teaching posture and form more clearly than some of his assistant instructors. After class, as the mats were being cleaned and bags were slung over shoulders, Mia caught up with Amara outside the dojo. "Thank you for helping me," she said. "No one's ever done that before. They just ignore me." Amara turned and looked her in the eyes. "I believe you're stronger than anyone gives you credit for. Just don't let them decide who you are." That evening, as the city lights flickered to life, Mia sat alone in her room, turning over everything she'd seen. Her mind returned to that night days ago when she had accidentally caught Amara training in the park under the moonlight. Back then, it had been surreal, Amara slicing through the air with movements that were fluid, powerful, and disciplined. That wasn't beginner's form. That was something else entirely. Mia pulled out her phone and rewatched the footage she had recorded. Every step, every kata movement, was near perfect. She began to search. First just curiosity, then a feeling she couldn't explain. Hours passed. In a dusty martial arts archive site buried deep online, she found an old article, dated 2014. It showed a grainy photo of a young girl, her skin a deep brown, her eyes intense and proud as she stood on a winner's podium in Japan. The caption read, "Amara Gardner, first African-American female to win All Japan Youth Karate Cup." Mia's breath caught. She zoomed in on the scar on the girl's arm, identical to the one she'd seen on Amara that day in the locker room. This was her. But, why had she disappeared? Why was she pretending to be a beginner? The next morning, Mia arrived at the dojo early and waited at the entrance. When Amara came walking up, Mia held out the phone with the paused video on the screen. "Why did you hide this?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Amara looked at it for a long moment, her face unreadable. Then she replied, calm and firm. "Because people don't see what's real until they need to. I wanted to see who they really were, before I showed them who I am." Mia didn't ask again. She simply nodded, and for the first time, Amara smiled back, not just politely, but genuinely. It was the beginning of an alliance. One forged in quiet resilience and hidden strength. And the first ripple in what would become a tidal wave of change at Golden Dragon. Word spread fast, quiet at first, like a whisper trailing beneath the surface of the Golden Dragon dojo. But it grew with each passing class. Some students started noticing it, the way Amara could read their movements before they made them, how her form, once sloppy, now seemed effortlessly precise. Others noticed how she helped beginners, never loudly, but with subtle cues and gestures that fixed balance, tightened stances, and corrected breathing. She did it better than some of Rick's longtime assistants. Still, Tyler and Josh doubled down on their campaign to break her spirit. One afternoon, Josh offered to help Amara retie her belt before class began. He loosened the knot just enough to cause a fall, then walked away with an exaggerated wink. Tyler, meanwhile, had chalk dust scattered across a small patch of the mat to make it slippery. During drills, Amara's foot slid. She caught herself, barely avoiding a fall, but laughter broke out around the room. "Better put training wheels on that belt," Tyler shouted. Erica, standing nearby with her clipboard and ever-vigilant eye on dojo optics, didn't intervene. But this time, Mia did. She stood up in the middle of the mat, her voice sharp and furious. "You should be ashamed. This is supposed to be a place of respect, not your personal playground." The room froze. Even Rick hesitated, unsure how to react. Tyler sneered. "So now we've got two princesses. Maybe start your own dojo of crying girls." Josh crossed his arms, eyes daring Mia. "You gonna pick your side now?" And in that moment, everything shifted. The class divided. On one side, Tyler, Josh, Erica, and the old guard. On the other, Mia, Amara, a few curious beginners, and some students who had remained silent for too long. Rick didn't say a word. Amara, her fingers tightly wrapped around her belt, didn't speak either. But she bowed. Slowly. With deep reverence. Then, as if summoned by fate, the glass door at the front of the dojo opened. In walked a tall, silver-haired man dressed in a crisp gray suit. His presence was quiet but commanding, and even Tyler took a step back. Rick blinked in disbelief. "Can I help you?" Rick asked cautiously. The man gave a respectful bow in traditional Japanese fashion. "I am Kenji Tanaka. I've come to observe." Gasps rippled through the room. Erica nearly dropped her clipboard. That name wasn't just familiar, it was legendary. Amara froze, her hands gripping her belt tighter than ever. She knew that voice. Kenji Tanaka had once taught her mother. He had watched Amara grow from toddler to warrior in secret family dojos across Okinawa. And now, he was here, watching her in silence. Nobody realized it yet, but this quiet entrance was the beginning of the unraveling, for the dojo, for the lies, and for every fake smile that had once dismissed Amara. The next few days passed like walking on glass. The dojo's air was thick with tension. Tyler's crew kept their distance, but their sneers never stopped. Erica, visibly unnerved by Kenji's continued presence in the observation area, tried to maintain composure, but her fake smile strained. Then came Challenge Day, a public dojo event designed for students to demonstrate progress. Families filled the benches. Parents held cameras. Even a few local reporters arrived, courtesy of Erica's media invites. She had a plan: let Amara fail publicly. Let the embarrassment go viral and shut down the rumors of her rising status. Erica stepped forward with a microphone and her usual artificial charm. To start today's challenge, our newest beginner, Amara Gardner, will perform a basic kata, followed by a light sparring demonstration with Sensei Rick. A test of courage and humility. Amara stepped to the center of the mat. Her threadbare gi looked too large. Her belt slightly off-center. She bowed low, the crowd murmuring. The kata began. Her first few steps were wobbly. Her strikes underpowered. Tyler rolled his eyes. Erica smiled smugly. Josh nudged another student. Then, Amara closed her eyes. And when they opened again, they were different. Every motion that followed was sharp, explosive, and rooted in centuries of tradition. Her body flowed like water, her strikes slicing the air with speed and grace. Each movement echoed the precise lineage of Japanese karate, pure, disciplined, breathtaking. The room went silent. By the time Amara finished, the final stomp of her stance reverberated like thunder across the floor. No one laughed. No one moved. Then a slow ripple of applause started. First one parent, then another. Until the room erupted in cheers. But it wasn't over. Rick stepped onto the mat. "You ready for the sparring portion?" he asked, his tone uncertain for the first time. Amara bowed. "Yes, Sensei." They circled. Rick struck first, a fast combo of jabs and a low kick. Amara dodged them all effortlessly, countering with a swift block and pivot. He tried again, this time faster, more aggressive. But again, Amara flowed around his force, using his momentum against him. She wasn't just sparring. She was teaching. Each move she made was a lesson in control, in precision, in the quiet dominance of someone who didn't need to prove anything anymore. And then Kenji stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice calm but firm, "you have just witnessed the return of Thunderhand. The last heir of the Tanaka legacy. Amara Gardner." Gasps, followed by stunned silence. Then a roar of applause. Tyler's face went pale. Josh looked as though he might collapse. Erica dropped her phone. In that single moment, every sneer, every cruel laugh, and every doubting glance evaporated. Amara bowed to the crowd, to Rick, and lastly to Kenji. She had arrived. The dojo didn't sleep that night. Phones buzzed. Videos from Challenge Day flooded social media. Clips of Amara's kata, her strikes, her footwork, her graceful dominance, spread like wildfire. The tag, #ThunderhandReturns, trended across platforms. Even local news ran a segment titled, Unknown Black Belt Stuns Atlanta Karate Scene. Erica sat in her office well past midnight, staring at her computer screen, eyes wide as the comments poured in. My daughter wants to join Golden Dragon just to be trained by Amara. This is the energy martial arts needs in America. She made that sensei look like a beginner. She clicked over to the academy's internal roster system. Amara's profile glowed like a target. Her hand hovered over the Remove button. Insurance concerns, safety violations, unauthorized history, she tried to convince herself. But her finger never clicked. She scrolled down and saw hundreds of new inquiries for class enrollment, all asking for Amara. Across the city, in a quiet apartment, Amara sat cross-legged on the floor of her small bedroom. Her black belt was laid out neatly in front of her. Mia, Josh, and even Rick had messaged her. But she wasn't ready to reply. Not yet. Instead, she looked out the window into the moonlight and breathed slowly, each inhale pulling in calm, each exhale pushing out doubt. Until the shadow stepped from the tree. Amara didn't move, but she saw him instantly, a tall Japanese man, early 30s, lean and rigid. His face bore the stoic discipline of a soldier, but his eyes were filled with something far darker. I am Hiroshi Kojima, he said, in perfect English. Son of Kojiro Kojima. The name struck her like lightning. Her family's greatest rival. My father was shamed by your bloodline. You disgraced the house of Kojima. I've come to settle the debt. He handed her a card sealed with a red wax emblem. A challenge issued by an underground martial arts council. A duel for honor between heirs. If you refuse, Hiroshi said calmly, it will not end here. The next morning, the dojo buzzed with more energy than ever. Crowds had already begun gathering outside, hoping to catch a glimpse of Amara in person. Inside, Tyler sat frozen. His cocky veneer now a hollow mask. Josh, seated across the room, was quiet, not with shame, but with reflection. Mia approached Amara during warm-ups. I heard about last night. Is it true? Amara gave a slow nod. It's not just about me anymore. It's about the truth. The legacy. The choice to end this war. Rick overheard. He stepped forward, folding his arms. Who is he? Someone trained to believe we are enemies, Amara said. But I don't want to fight hatred with more hatred. Rick looked at her for a long moment. Then what will you do? I'll fight him, she said. But not to win. To free him. News of the challenge exploded within hours. Dojos across Georgia chimed in. Commentators debated the match. Was it legal? Could Golden Dragon allow a traditional duel? Erica, still clinging to her deteriorating control, convened a closed meeting with Tyler and the senior students. Her tone was cold, businesslike. Golden Dragon has always stood for excellence. If Amara brings scandal to our name, she brings it alone. Anyone who supports her, walks away from this dojo. Tyler nodded, but his usual fire was gone. That night, Josh skipped training. Instead, he sat across from his father, Alan Wilson, a grizzled former MMA champ who had always trained him with harsh discipline and cold demands. The living room was cluttered with trophies, worn gloves, and a heavy silence. You're gonna back that girl now? Alan asked. You wanna lose on purpose? Let her humiliate you. Josh didn't blink. I've realized that if I have to become someone like you to win, then winning's not worth it. Alan's mouth twisted into a snarl, but Josh stood and walked away. The next morning, Amara was waiting at the park before dawn. Josh appeared, still breathless from his run. No apologies. No big words. Just a quiet request. I want to learn. Real strength. Not the kind that breaks others, but the kind that controls itself. Amara nodded. Then let's begin. They trained in secret. Breathing. Flow. Response. Stillness. Amara's lessons weren't about force, but about presence. Josh began to change, not just physically, but inwardly. He moved with clarity, no longer rushing, no longer seeking approval. Meanwhile, Erica's world began to crumble. Whispers of scandal surfaced. Former students accused her of falsifying their competition records. Others said she pressured them into unsafe matches to boost Golden Dragon's win rates. One even claimed Erica doctored age records to qualify older teens for youth tournaments. Tyler's secret performance-enhancing supplements were also uncovered, illegal in amateur martial arts. Erica tried to spin the narrative, but emails leaked. Her reputation began to collapse. Parents demanded answers. Sponsors threatened to pull out. And amid all of it, Amara stood tall, training not for a trophy, but to prove that tradition could stand beside justice. The dojo teetered on the edge of collapse. Then came the day of reckoning. The state tournament. Thousands packed the arena. Media outlets buzzed. Social feeds surged. But no one cared about the medals. They came to witness the match that would settle a generational grudge. On one side, Hiroshi Kojima, the weapon of a legacy soaked in bitterness. On the other, Amara Gardner, a girl who'd been mocked, dismissed, and nearly erased, but who rose anyway. As Amara tightened her old black belt backstage, Kenji Tanaka placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Remember, the greatest victory isn't in domination. It's in liberation. She bowed to him, and walked toward the ring. The crowd roared as Amara stepped into the arena, but her eyes didn't acknowledge the thousands watching. She focused only on her breath, on the ring beneath her bare feet, on the final challenge she was about to face, not just against Hiroshi Kojima, but against the weight of history. Hiroshi stood opposite her in silence, his lean body coiled like a spring. He wore a black GI with the red Kojima crest pressed proudly across his chest. His bow was sharp, mechanical. "Let's end this," he muttered, the bitterness in his voice more ancient than personal. Amara returned the bow, low, respectful, unwavering. "I agree. But I will not destroy you." The judge raised his hand. "Begin." Hiroshi launched forward, a barrage of spinning kicks and sharp elbow strikes breaking through the air with brutal force. His style was aggressive, a hybrid of traditional karate and underground techniques meant for takedowns and humiliation. The crowd leaned in, gasping with each strike. But Amara didn't crumble. She moved like water, evading with quiet precision. She redirected his force rather than blocking it, stepping around his rage, not against it. Still, the fight was real. Each hit from Hiroshi was a message. A confession. A cry for vengeance from a boy who'd grown up hearing only one story: the Tanakas destroyed us. The Gardners humiliated us. Revenge is the only redemption. Midway through the second round, Hiroshi landed a roundhouse kick that struck Amara directly in the side, right over the scar she'd carried for years. The pain was white-hot. Her body faltered. Gasps erupted. Tyler, sitting in the front row, clenched his fists. Josh leapt to his feet. Mia cried out from the crowd, her voice lost in the rising noise. Hiroshi didn't hesitate. He pressed forward like a storm, launching a vicious chain of attacks, fists, knees, every strike meant to finish her. But Amara didn't fall. She stood, blood at the edge of her lip, and closed her eyes. She heard her father's voice. "You don't fight just to win, Amara. You fight to reveal the truth. Even if the world sees you as weak, be still. Let them see your strength when it matters most." And then she heard Kenji. Only compassion can untangle hatred. Defeating an enemy is easy. Freeing them is far harder. She opened her eyes, clear, still, calm. When Hiroshi lunged again, she didn't counterattack with power. She stepped in. Soft. Quiet. She wrapped his arm in a Tanaka-style redirect, gently using his own momentum to swing him off balance. And just as he went to recover, expecting a final blow, Amara stepped into his space and pressed her open palm over his chest. Right over his heart. Every eye in the arena widened. She stood perfectly still, her breathing measured, her hand unmoving. She could have finished him. She could have broken his ribs, shattered his pride. But she didn't. Instead, she whispered, loud enough for only him, and everyone, to hear. I choose to end this hatred. Not to destroy it. But to release it. Hiroshi froze. The noise in the arena evaporated into a stunned silence. Every camera flash stopped. Every voice hushed. And then, Hiroshi's knees buckled. Not from pain. Not from defeat. But from the unbearable weight of a lifetime chasing vengeance that had led to nothing but emptiness. I've lived with hatred for too long, he whispered hoarsely, tears welling in his eyes. So long. I forgot why I even fought. Amara stepped back and bowed deeply. Hiroshi dropped to his knees and returned the bow, his forehead touching the mat. The judge didn't need to declare a winner. The crowd rose in a standing ovation that shook the building. People wept openly. Others clapped wildly, their voices chanting one name, Amara. 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 Sensei Rick stood. His eyes were wet. Kenji Tanaka walked slowly to the center and raised Amara's hand in the air. This, he said, is what martial arts was always meant to be. Not a path of war, but a way of healing. The Tanaka legacy lives, not through violence, but through her. Even Tyler stood now, awestruck. Josh placed a hand on his shoulder. You see it now? Tyler gave the smallest nod. I see everything now. Erica, seated in the press booth with a forced smile, didn't stand. Her fingers trembled as she tried to turn off her camera feed. But it was too late. The world had already seen. Amara bowed again to the crowd, no arrogance, no pride. Only peace. In that moment, the girl who had been laughed at, bullied, and dismissed became something far more than just a champion. She became a symbol. Of strength. Of change. Of quiet revolution. The shockwaves from the tournament echoed far beyond the arena. Clips of Amara's match with Hiroshi flooded every corner of the internet, uploaded, re-edited, praised in different languages. Major martial arts organizations requested interviews. International forums dissected her every movement, noting the grace, the restraint, the ancient purity in her technique. But it wasn't just fighters who were moved. Mothers who had daughters. Teenagers struggling with identity. People who had once been told they didn't belong. All of them saw something more than a viral video. They saw themselves. Back at Golden Dragon, change was already in motion. The dojo, once cold and divided, now pulsed with life. For the first time in years, the mats were filled with laughter, not cruel, but genuine. Respectful bows. Collaborative drills. A space that felt like home. Rick, once the indifferent instructor upholding tradition for appearance's sake, called an emergency board meeting. Erica, seated confidently across the table, assumed the meeting was about damage control. Instead, Rick presented a signed agreement. I'm buying out your stake in Golden Dragon, he said calmly. You're joking, she scoffed, looking around for backup. No one spoke. Even the senior students she had once controlled remained silent. Rick continued. You've misrepresented student records, falsified tournament results, and prioritized image over integrity. The Georgia State Karate Commission agrees. You have until the end of the week. You're making a mistake, Erica snapped. Without me, this place dies. Rick stood and bowed toward the room. No. Without her, this place never truly lived. By Friday, Erica was gone. The sign above the dojo came down with it. In its place, Gardner Tanaka Karate Academy. The rebranding ceremony drew hundreds. Cameras. Community leaders. Former students who had once walked away, now returning. Amara stood at the center, dressed in a clean white gi, her old black belt around her waist. Beside her, Rick wore a white belt too. I've been a teacher for 20 years, Rick said as he bowed to her. But I'm ready to start over. Will you be my instructor? Amara bowed deeply. It would be an honor, Sensei Rick. The crowd erupted in applause. That day marked a rebirth, not just of a building, but of philosophy. Classes were redesigned. There were no separate groups for favorites or advanced. Belts still mattered, but growth and humility mattered more. And Tyler, once the cruel ringleader, approached Amara after class, eyes lowered. I've hurt a lot of people, he murmured. I don't expect forgiveness. But, is there any way I can help? Amara looked at him for a long moment. True strength begins with regret, she said softly. But it grows through the courage to stand up for someone else. He bowed. Then I want to start right. From that day forward, Tyler, Josh, and Mia formed a new trio, not of bullies, but of builders. Together, they launched a class just for kids who had been bullied, neglected, or forgotten. A safe space. A healing dojo. They didn't begin with punches or kicks. Their first lessons were breath work, stillness, and trust. Josh taught how to transform anger. Tyler spoke openly about his past and how he changed. And Mia, once a shy girl hiding behind glasses, now stood in front of groups of young girls, teaching them how to find pride in their own voices. And every Saturday, under the same oak tree where Amara once trained in secret, she now led the entire academy, children, teens, adults, even parents, in open-air meditation and kata. Gone were the sneers. Gone were the fake smiles. Now there were only steady breaths. Shared strength. A dojo reborn. But this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something bigger. One warm afternoon, months after the dojo's transformation, the golden Atlanta sun filtered through the tall windows of the Gardner Tanaka Academy. It painted ribbons of light across the hardwood floors where barefoot children stood in neat circles, facing their instructors with bright eyes and hopeful hearts. In the center stood Amara, dressed not in black or white, but in a soft gray gi. A symbol of balance. She looked around the room, not at ranks, belts, or perfection, but at growth. Sensei Amara, a small voice asked. It came from a girl no older than 7, her hair braided tightly and her voice barely above a whisper. How can I be as strong as you? The room stilled. Amara crouched down to the child's level. Her voice was calm, her smile warm. Strength, she said, is not in how hard you punch. It's not in medals. Or belts. True strength is in how deeply you breathe when someone doubts you. It's in the way you stand up when it's easier to stay silent. It's forgiving those who hurt you. It's loving yourself when the world tells you not to. The class was quiet. Even Rick, now a white-belted student seated in the back row, lowered his gaze in reverent thought. Amara stood again and gently called, "Circle up." The students formed a wide circle, children who had once been bullied, teens who used to fight out of pain, adults rediscovering who they were. And among them stood Tyler, Josh, and Mia, no longer defined by who they used to be but by the compassion they now shared. Amara closed her eyes and raised her hand. Breathe in. Dozens inhaled together. Breathe out. The sound was like the tide. Kenji Tanaka, now too old to teach but still ever present, sat at the edge of the room near the open door, his eyes glossy as he watched his legacy not just continue, but evolve. Outside, Hiroshi Kojima helped a group of older students with kata drills. Once an enemy, now a mentor. Once fueled by hatred, now by humility. He had never left Atlanta after the tournament. Instead, he asked to stay, and to learn. Amara had welcomed him without hesitation. And so, the dojo became more than a place of practice. It became a sanctuary. A refuge for those seeking redemption, strength, healing. The past wasn't erased. It was embraced, used as fuel to rise. In every class, before a single move was thrown, Amara began with one practice: stories. Each student was encouraged to share a fear they had, a mistake they made, or a hope they carried. Here, vulnerability was the first step toward power. Promotions were no longer about mastering a move. To advance, a student had to explain what they had overcome, emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. The belt ceremonies became circles of gratitude. Tears often accompanied laughter. Hugs followed every bow. And on rainy days, when thunder rolled in the distance and old doubts tried to creep in, students still came, just to sit in the dojo, sip warm tea, and be reminded of who they were becoming. One such evening, Amara stood by the window, watching the courtyard fill with students and parents arriving in the drizzle. Children splashed in puddles. Newcomers bowed awkwardly. Former skeptics now beamed with quiet pride. Mia approached, holding a clipboard. "We've got 30 new sign-ups just this week," she said, then paused. All of them said the same thing: they came because they wanted to feel safe. They wanted to learn how to stand tall. Amara nodded, eyes still on the courtyard. "Then we're doing it right." Behind her, Rick swept the floors, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Because humility, he'd learned, was the real mark of a master. That night, before locking the doors, Amara placed her old black belt, her father's belt, on the shrine shelf in the dojo's heart. Above it, a framed inscription in both English and Japanese. "Strength is born from adversity. Legacy is built on compassion." As the lights dimmed, her shadow stretched across the wooden floor, merging with those of the next generation. And in the echoing silence, the question that began it all returned, no longer just for her, but for every soul who entered the dojo. Will you fight to prove yourself? Or will you fight to change the world? Amara Gardner chose the latter. And the world followed. Amara Gardner's journey reminds us that the strongest warriors don't fight to crush their enemies, they fight to uplift others. She didn't just win a match. She ended a feud. She didn't just prove herself. She transformed an entire community. Her story teaches us that real power isn't loud, it's steady, kind, and unshakably true. As Kenji Tanaka once said, to master karate is to master one's heart. If this story inspired you, please share it with someone who needs strength today. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to True Echo, where powerful stories echo across generations. Your story could be next.